All right. Here I am, finally, I think a month later, more than a month probably, since I set this up and played the first part of turn 1 of Blitz in the East. I'm back to try turn 2. If you're a war gamer or a gamer and you're in your 50s or late 40s and you don't have kids yet, if you want to keep playing games, don't do it. That's all I'm going to say about that. So to begin this turn, the Soviets begin the game with the Great Patriotic War card in hand, and they draw the Sturmovik card, and they get to play one of them, and then the other one will stay in their hand. So the Sturmovik card allows the Soviets to resurrect air units, which is going to be helpful for them eventually, but the Germans have only destroyed one so far. So over here you see the destroyed units. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 infantry armies and 2 armored units have been destroyed, and 1 air force. They don't actually float around in the Black Sea. They go off map. But the Soviets need to spend resources to bring those units back on. They're not able to upgrade their cadre units at this point. The Great Patriotic War card has a drawback that the Soviets will not collect production on this turn if they play that card. So they won't be able to bring in any reinforcements, and they won't be able to sort of like refit any units. They also won't be able to purchase the offensive kit, but that's probably fine. What the Great Patriotic War does provide for the Soviets is, for the rest of the game, or until the card is canceled, it allows them to have a massive reduction in the cost to take actions along the lines of upgrading and resurrecting and refitting units. So that's fantastic. It does lead to the cost of the offensive kit being doubled for them. So that's an issue. But early on in the game, the Soviets definitely do not need to be launching any kind of major offensives, and so they will play the Great Patriotic War, and the Sturmovik card will be available for the next turn if they need it. So the Germans have, in some ways, ravaged Soviet lines. In other ways, not quite so much. So the Soviets have only 3 out-of-supply units at this point. These 2 units here, to be in supply, you have to trace a series of hexes of any length through friendly-controlled hexes to your supply source. The sea could be a supply source, but the Axis controls the Baltic Sea right now. And so the only way to get there would be through this hex, which is a disputed hex. The German armored unit projects a zone of control, as well as the Soviet units. And so they're out of supply. That's bad for them. They're going to be in some difficulty, eliminated most likely. This unit here is basically completely surrounded and will, without any doubt, be eliminated by the end of the game. But the Soviets have managed to preserve a little line of units here in pretty good defensible terrain, and one of them is an armor unit. And the Germans, the Axis anyway, haven't done much on the southern front. So the Soviets have to figure out what they want to do about trying to reorganize their defenses. And the game begins, the turn begins with the administrative phase, where they play that, and then you determine supply. And so we are determining supply, I've already determined supply. There's 3 out-of-supply units. And then if you have any production, you can collect production point and then spend it, but the Soviets do not. So the next is strategic rail movement and then operational movement. So rail movement is from a rail yard hex to another rail yard hex, and units that do that are able to move again in a later phase, but the hex cannot be in, I believe it cannot be in an enemy zone of control. It maybe cannot be in a disputed zone of control either. So that points out one major problem. The Soviets lost their unit in Leningrad. I don't remember exactly how that happened. I think the Germans launched a low-cost offensive and scored a hit or something like that. So the German unit here, or this is the Finnish unit, I should say, is currently disorganized. And so I don't believe it projects a zone of control, although I should know that by now, but it's been a month. So I'll figure that out in a bit. But then the question is, for rail movement, can you enter a rail yard adjacent to an enemy unit if you are, if the unit is not projecting a zone of control into it? There's certainly no zone of control here at all because it's urban. So that's the only thing that matters about this is, are the Russians able to rail a unit to Leningrad to try to keep that from falling? That would be very bad for them. It would allow the Germans to make a push for the turn 3 Blitz victory conditions if they so choose. And so let's find out about that here. I'm going to pause for just a moment. Okay, so as expected, Soviets cannot use rail movement to get a unit to Leningrad, and they also can't use rail movement to get a unit to Riga. So I think they have to try to use operational movement, which gives them, but even that's not going to work, is it? So, well, so yeah, so the Soviets could get this cavalry unit into Leningrad. During operational movement, you are able to move at 1 movement point per hex, regardless of terrain. So 1, 2, 3. Yeah, I can't get there. 1, 2, 3. So Riga is going to fall, but that's not so bad at this point. Riga is going to fall anyway. But Leningrad, they might get Leningrad garrisoned there, and this unit needs to reorganize and such. So let's see if the Soviets can hold Leningrad. So then, in terms of rail movement, I've got some units that are not showing in the video because I can't get super great coverage on the video. But I'm going to conduct some rail movement in any case. I'll slide this back just a little bit so you can see where they're coming from. So the Germans certainly seem to be going for Moscow here. And so there is a unit that these units should be in Moscow. They got bumped. There's already a unit defending Moscow, and they won't need to be there right now. So we might move them out. So it looks like the Germans are headed this way, right? And so what should the Soviets try to do to guard against that? That's not a rail hex there. So is there any place that these units could be better used and then hopefully bring in reinforcements? So this unit here in Kharkov will rail its way up to Odessa, which is important if the Germans are going to try to get a Blitz victory on turn 2. Then they want to capture Odessa. The same applies to Kiev here. And so the Russians definitely want to have a unit there. And the 3rd Blitz victory hex is Smolensk. And so they're going to leave a unit in Smolensk. The armored unit here isn't on a rail hex. So the infantry unit is going to use rail movement, strategic rail movement, to get itself up to Kiev. And that is all that I can think of worth doing for strategic rail movement. So we'll move on to operational movement. So for operational movement, the units can basically just move as many hexes as they have movement points, regardless of terrain. There are some exceptions for crossing the Volga River, and armored units cannot enter prohibited terrain. But from the Soviet perspective, that means they can move this unit 1, 2, 3 and pull into Leningrad to try to defend that city. And so what else is happening here that is risky? I think as the Russian commander, I've got a sense that I'm doing okay keeping this area. I sort of wouldn't mind if the Germans went all crazy and tried to head that way at this point. feel like I have units available and time to protect them. But what I do have are a bunch of units here that are in upfront hexes that are potentially vulnerable to being encircled if I'm not careful. And I also have very little up in this area to try to stem the flow of German units into towards Moscow, which we definitely do not want to have fall. And so I think then that for operational movement, I'm going to try to garrison this defensible terrain here in a way that makes it hard for the Germans to take it. So this is an armored unit. It's got 4 movement points. This has 5. To move out of a zone of control, you can't start up front for operational movement, so forget that. Being in a zone of control is irrelevant here. So I think it makes sense starting, well, sort of a little bit off map here, to take this cavalry unit, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and just bring it up. I'll rotate it so I know I've moved it. Bring it up and get it ready to be of use somewhere. And so I will be able to fall back. So if I 1, 2, 3. No, let's hold off on that. Let's try 1. Yeah. 1, 2, 3. That at least creates some zone of control stuff here for the Germans to have to worry about a little bit. And then this up here, 1, 2, 3. This looks like I've got woods, I've got rivers from some directions. The Germans can certainly get up here and launch an attack there. So probably that's where that unit should stop, right? Does that make sense? I think that makes sense. So those will rotate because they have moved operationally. Now I think the question is, do I place a slightly weaker unit into Kiev here and run the risk of the Germans taking that more easily? I think that the Germans just are not likely to be able to achieve their turn 2 Blitz victory objectives on this turn. I don't imagine they'll capture Smolensk, Kiev, and also Odessa on this turn. So I'm going to say if Kiev falls, that's bad, but not horribly bad. So I'm going to move this unit 2, 3, and from there, I think it can move again during the ground movement phase. I'll double check that. And then this unit will use operational movement to move back in garrison Kiev. They can't operationally move. That unit that I railed over to Odessa could use operational movement right now, but that is where I want it to be. And this unit has moved operationally. That's where I want it to be right there. Now, their air units, Soviets, they have air units that have survived. They only lost a single air unit. So certainly this air unit here in Kiev can fly back here. If the Soviets have some air reaction on their turn, this unit can reach either Odessa or Kiev if it would be useful there. The Soviets have an air unit in Moscow which could reach Smolensk if it would be useful there. And now can an air unit operationally? No, it can't operationally move because it's next to it. It's in an upfront hex. But on regular, no. So yeah, so that air unit is stuck there and is likely looking at being eliminated too. Hopefully Sturmovik will take care of that on the second turn. So I think that's all the operational movement I'm going to do. As I scan the map one more time. And so we're going to move on to ground movement and then attrition. Okay, I was wrong. units that move operationally may not move again during the ground movement phase. And so this unit moved operationally, and this unit moved operationally. We will keep that unit's operational movement. I don't think the Germans will get up there and hit it in the open terrain. And then on the next turn, if nothing else, it is able to swing around and get into the defense there. So, and the reason for that is that this allows us to move some of these units back out of harm's way a little bit and put up some version of a defense. So I think that what we're going to do, need to make some speed bumps. So this armored unit here, it will move. It's going to move 1 and pay a second for moving into or out of the zone of control. And then it's going to move for 3 into Kiev, and it will stay in Kiev. This cavalry unit and this cavalry unit, they can move some. These are fairly weak axis units here. I think I can take this cavalry unit and move. Where can I move? 1, 2, 3. I think that might be a helpful spot for this unit to be. Well, will the German... Well, so then, in that case, we're sort of, if that's what we're doing, we're kind of making a sacrifice here. We're going to go 1, 2... No, you know what? 3, 4, 5. Does that make sense? You can see I don't, not particularly good at wargaming. I just like it a lot. So this unit here could theoretically move here. It would move 1 into the clear and then pay an extra to move out of the zone of control. But would that be any good? That other hex there is a swamp, and that's going to cost 2 movement. So they cannot do that because they have to pay up movement for moving out of the enemy zone of control. And so I think I'm going to leave the Soviet defenses as they are. And so we're now going to have to do the attrition phase, which is going to result in a fair bit of destruction for the Soviets. But I don't think there's anything I can do. Would it make sense to move this unit out of here? If it's getting attacked, it will end up being a little bit surrounded on the attack. And it, oh yes, and if you know what, if this unit has to retreat, it's going to be, so this unit's going to go there instead. I think we need to leave that unit a path. It may survive the battle, but need to retreat. Although that unit could also be forced to retreat and cut it off. That's a level of thinking beyond my skill set, I think. So I'm going to count up some upfront hex factors, and we'll see what the attrition phase brings. All right, the attrition phase. I should go ahead and just recenter these units, I think. So as I counted up, the phasing player's units only provide an impact if they are supplied. So the Soviets really have this unit and organized. They have to be organized. They really only have this unit and this unit up front. So they only have 4 combat factors up front. They have no upfront air factors because this air unit is out of supply, and they have no upfront armor. So the Germans have armor superiority, air superiority, and they have 26 upfront factors. Upfront being units that are, no, they have more than that. They have 14, 15, 20, 21, 30. They have 33. So on the table here, the Soviets are in this column and the Germans are in this column. And the Germans move 2 more columns because they have armored superiority and they have air superiority. And I don't think the surprise bonus... Does the surprise bonus count for the entire turn or only for the Axis turn? I need to look that up. Be right back. Surprise bonus. So we have the Germans here in this column and the Soviets in this column, but then it moves up 2 columns. So we end up with 2 hits to the Germans. I don't think the Soviets were expecting to do that, and 1 hit to the Soviets. And at the end of this phase, any units that, or during this phase, any units that are out of supply that suffer a hit take 2 hits. And so the, and also, I should point out that the I believe that the Soviets are also now, they get a battle marker, but they don't have the offensive chip, but they can also claim 1 attrition hex. I doubt they'll be doing that, but they could. I think I'm right about that. Well, let's see. So the Soviets have to apply a hit, and these 2 units here are the ones to take the hit from. They're going to be removed. So these out of supply units that are hit are considered surrendered, and they go into the Hiwis box, which makes them, it's a different procedure to bring them back into the game for the Soviets, and I'm not exactly clear on what that procedure is. So I had to reverse that. So I got this a little bit screwy. So it's 2 hits inflicted by the Germans, 1 hit inflicted by the Soviets. So the Soviets will inflict that hit on that unit, and they will, they'll inflict a hit on this unit. I think maybe putting units in the Hiwis box intentionally is bad. I don't know, but we're doing it. And that's the 2 hits that the Germans inflict. And now the Soviets, the Germans have to take a hit. It's up to the Germans which units where they take their hit. And so I'm thinking that, is there a unit here? Yeah, I think no, they're not up front, so they can't take it. These are all strong units that will be in the attack. Maybe this little 1-3 unit is the one to disorganize. The first hit disorganizes a unit. Maybe that's the way to go. All right, well, that's the way we're going to go. So now we would move on to the attack phase and the Blitz phase, but the Soviets, as we know, did not have the attack kit this turn. So that phase does not occur. And now we do the final supply check, and this unit is out of supply, and so it will also surrender. I guess you can't keep fighting if you don't have food and bullets and things. And that is the last Soviet out of supply unit. They do have an air unit here that I guess is out of supply. I'm going to have to figure out what to do about that, but I'm going to figure that out prior to the next German turn. At this point, I'm going to end the video and move on to the Axis turn 2.